Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the Blindside Rugby Podcast with me, Chris. This is episode 10 of our weekly podcast. I say weekly, and I have to give you my apologies for not being here last week. I was traveling in Kenya, so couldn't record there, but I'm back this week. Back at work and back getting up to speed on all the rugby news, and there's been a lot of stuff happening with the announcements of the World Cup squads, a few of them for this year's Rugby World Cup. Just a reminder that the Rugby World Cup for this year in Japan kicks off on the 20th of September, so less than a month now. What do you say, 3 weeks? Very, very exciting. I can't wait for it to get started, to watch all the pool games. I think it's a very open World Cup. The All Blacks, obviously, that's my team, and I hope they win. But I think the Springboks especially look quite strong. England and Ireland are potential winners. Wales always have a chance, although Gareth Anscombe is unfortunately out injured. And then also Australia. You can never count out the Aussies, and maybe even Argentina on their day, and with the weird bounce of a rugby ball. Maybe they could surprise a few teams, so let's see. But this week I'll just go through the Springbok and All Blacks World Cup squads and a few things that stood out to me. We'll also talk about the Currie Cup, the upcoming semi-finals this weekend, and then also go through the action from the Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand. So to kick us off, the All Blacks squad was announced, the one-man team, squad, apologies. I didn't know for how long I could hold out, and it's not very long so far on this podcast, but for some reason, Sonny Bill Williams is in the squad, and Nane Laumape is not. I see no real merit to picking Sonny Bill Williams. He has suffered many injuries the last few years and the last few weeks and months. He has not put together a consistent run of good performances. When he plays, he's inconsistent. That whole thing of he brings unpredictability and all of that, I don't think that's enough to go on. Laumape had his best season of professional rugby so far in his career, and it was still not enough to get picked for this World Cup. So if I was him, I'd be very sad and disappointed, but I'm sure he'll stick around and try again for the next World Cup, and he should then hopefully get rewarded for that, if he can obviously keep up his form. But that's sort of the biggest standout to me in terms of the outside backs and the midfield. I don't understand why Sonny Bill Williams is there. Obviously I can just hope that Steve Hansen and the rest of the coaching staff know what they're doing with him, and that their faith that he won't get injured will be enough, and also that his discipline won't let him down. So let's see. But that to me is a real, I don't know, I think that's a big misstep in this All Blacks squad for the World Cup. So I don't know. I'm quite downbeat on that whole thing. Also another one, Owen Franks, who misses out on sort of the whole issue of leaving our players and having to call them and picking a squad. New Zealand coach Steve Hansen, at the announcement, he had a few interesting things to say. He said it's the toughest part of the job. You're dealing with human beings who've got dreams and aspirations, and your phone call is taking it away from them. So obviously not an easy thing to do, to tell people that this tournament, this goal that they've been working towards for the last 4 years or maybe even longer, will not be realized. I really hope that Laumape stays in New Zealand, that this doesn't cause him to head overseas, because that would be a big loss for the future of the All Blacks. He's a prodigious talent. He's working hard on his areas of weakness, his shortcomings, and I think that should have been rewarded. But unfortunately, it hasn't been. One surprise inclusion was Luke Jacobson. He's 22 years old. Plays really well, I think, in this year's Super Rugby. He put in some really good performances. He's exciting, and I think it'll be good to see him in the All Black setup, especially for the future. He might not feature too much in the World Cup, but at least now he'll be part of the sort of setup, so he can learn a few things from the senior players. Then others unlucky to miss out are Jackson Hemapo and Vaya Fafita. In terms of balance, I think the squad is pretty balanced, well balanced. There's a few really experienced guys like Kieran Reid, Sonny Bill Williams, Sam Whitelock. Maybe that's the main reason they went for Sonny Bill, is the experience. Maybe even if he doesn't play, he'll still be part of the squad and he can help the players with, with issues of anxiety and that sort of thing. He has experience on the international level, so maybe that was part of their reasoning. If it's not for his on-field performances, it's for the off-field sort of worth that he brings to the team. So those ones, unlucky to miss out, I thought, but of course these things have to get cut down at some point. So it's a necessary evil to get your team down to 31 men. I'm not that confident about the All Blacks heading into this year's World Cup based on performances this year and last year. I don't feel like they're really on an upward trend. So unless they've been holding back, maybe that's the case. We'll see if they can display their full skills at this year's World Cup. We'll have to wait and see. On the Springboks, I think they have a very balanced squad, and based on their performances this year and last year, they're looking quite good, full of confidence. I think Coach Rassie Erasmus has built an environment of accountability and buy-in and camaraderie, which is very important going into World Cup, because they're all going to be together for a long time. Obviously, they'll be hoping that they reach the final, so it's a long time away from home with these people around you, so you want to be sort of friends with them and also get along well on the field, understand each other's roles and all of that. Just a few things that stood out. Apiwe Dianti, he tested positive for a banned substance, and now they're waiting for his B sample to come back. I think that should come back either today, Thursday, or tomorrow, Friday. And then that'll, indicate whether he'll continue playing rugby, I guess. I guess it depends on how serious it is. But Rassie Erasmus said he wouldn't have been in the squad. Well, he probably wouldn't have been in the squad anyway because of his recent hamstring injuries. I mean, he's a prodigious talent, so to lose him is quite a big deal for the Springboks, I think. But they have quite capable players who can fill in. There's also news that Eben Etzebeth was allegedly involved in an incident in Langebaan that involved violence and racism and that sort of thing. It's all alleged now, and he came out with a statement that strongly denied any sort of wrongdoing on his part. It's an unnecessary distraction, obviously not something you want before a World Cup. I hope, for his sake, obviously, that this didn't happen. It's never nice to hear these sorts of stories, but we'll have to see if any more, news or evidence comes out. But for now, he's in the squad. And then it was going to be a question of whether Reinhard Elstad, Warwick Galant, or Kwagga Smith would drop out. And unluckily for Elstad, he dropped out. So unlucky for him, but overall, I think a pretty good squad. They're taking 3 scrum halves in the form of Herschel Jantjies, Faf de Klerk, and Kobus Reinach. So interesting that they're going for 3 scrum halves. Most teams, I think, will take 2. Then we've got Andre Pollard at fly half, and Elton Jantjies will probably be his backup. And then Willie Leroux, I think, will be the starting fullback, and that Warwick Galant will be his backup. Also, Cheslin Colby should start on the wing. He's had a very, very good season, both for his club to lose and for the Springboks. So he should definitely start there on the wing. It'll be important for him to get as much game time as possible. The Australians also announced their squad. There were a few interesting names, but I don't have it all in detail here in front of me. So I'm not going to go through that right now. I just wanted to focus on the Springboks and the All Blacks this week. I think the week before the World Cup, so I said it starts on the 20th of September. So maybe around the 18th or 17th. So in a few weeks, I'll do more of an in-depth preview for the World Cup. I'll see how my schedule looks and how everything pans out. Maybe I can do sort of a big 6 kind of prediction, go through each team's fixtures and predict, or at least try and predict how I think they're going to go. Okay, then just moving on to domestic rugby in the Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand. Last week's games, Hawke's Bay beat Otago by 29 points to 21. Wellington beat Canterbury by 1 point, 23 to 22. It's another loss for Canterbury, their 3rd of the season, 3-3 games. I have no idea what's going on there, and I'm really worried. I mean, they might drop out of the the top division into the second tier division at this rate, unless they start winning all their games now with like bonus points or something. So I'm quite worried about Canterbury. Tasman destroyed Manawatu. The Tasman Marcos are probably the form team themselves and Taranaki. They beat Manawatu by 64 points to 3. Auckland beat Bay of Plenty by 19 points to 13. Counties Manukau were beaten by Waikato by 31 points to 26. Taranaki beat Northland 52 points to 19. And Southland and North Harbour was the final game. Fixtures for this coming weekend. This morning there was already one game. Wellington beat Counties Manukau by 29 points to 22. Then the next game we've got Otago against Manawatu. That's also a Ranfurly Shield game. So Otago defending the Ranfurly Shield there. Then we've got Canterbury against Southland. Southland haven't won a game, so hopefully Canterbury can win one game this season. If it's against Southland, that'll be something at least. Northland against Hawke's Bay, Waikato against Auckland, North Harbour versus Bay of Plenty, and finally Taranaki versus Tasman. That's going to be the pick of the weekend, I think. That's going to be an excellent game to watch. Then in the Currie Cup, South Africa's domestic competition, we've got the semi-finals this coming weekend. The first one on the 31st of August, so on Saturday at 3 p.m. We've got the Free State hosting the Sharks. In that game, I'm picking Free State to win by 7. I think it should be a pretty good game. In recent weeks, it seems like the fans have started flocking back to the Free State Stadium, so hopefully it'll be a well-supported game and good to watch. Hopefully there'll be some good rugby on. Then the next game, we've got Lions against Griquas at 5:15, and then there I'm picking Griquas to win by 5. I guess they're sort of my dark horse pick for this whole competition. And it'll be sort of a nice romantic tale of a traditionally smaller union if they can reach the final and hopefully win the whole competition. I think that'll be pretty good for rugby, for domestic rugby in South Africa. All right, I think I'll close there. So interesting news around the World Cup squads. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please remember that you can subscribe to this podcast on the various podcast platforms, including Google Play, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else you find and might subscribe to podcasts. Please remember to share the podcast with your friends, tell them about it. And let me know your views on things, how you're feeling before the World Cup. I'm sure most of you are Springbok supporters, so let me know how you feel about the squad. That first game between New Zealand and South Africa, that's their first pool game. That should be really good and sort of set the tone for the World Cup, I think. So I'm quite looking forward to that. But thank you all once again for joining me on the Blindside Rugby Podcast. I hope you have a good weekend. Enjoy all the rugby. And I'll talk to you again next week. Cheers.